You want $899 just to touch my engine? What a joke!
Keep laughing, but if you start that car again, someone will die, and the person who sabotaged it is standing right behind you.
If you start that engine again, someone will die, and the person who arranged it is standing in this garage. The laughter stopped so quickly that I could hear hot metal ticking beneath the rear cover of the $5 million hypercar. Hello, my name is Daniel Mercer. I am 47 years old, and I own a small performance garage outside Seattle, Washington. Most people who meet me see stained work boots, gray coveralls, and grease under my fingernails. They do not see the 25 years I spent learning how machines fail. They do not know that I once designed cooling systems for race cars. And they certainly do not know why I walked away from that world. This story began on a wet Tuesday morning when a black transport truck rolled into my parking lot. The driver climbed down and handed me a sealed work order. Inside the trailer sat a silver Valin Stratos X, one of only 12 ever built. The car looked less like a vehicle and more like a weapon from the future. Its carbon fiber body was low and sharp. Its hybrid engine produced more than 1,500 horsepower. The window sticker alone was higher than the value of every house on my street combined. The owner was Evelyn Cross, founder and CEO of Cross Dynamics. Her company built battery control systems for aircraft, military drones, and high-performance electric vehicles. She had been called the Queen of American Technology. Business magazines praised her courage. Investors treated her speeches like scripture. I knew another side of Cross Dynamics. 6 years earlier, my younger brother Michael had worked there as a test engineer. He died during a battery fire at a private laboratory in Nevada. The official report blamed him for ignoring safety rules. Cross Dynamics paid a fine, released a statement, and moved on. My family never did. I had spent years believing Michael had made one terrible mistake. Then, 3 weeks before Evelyn's hypercar arrived, I received an anonymous envelope. Inside were copies of test logs showing that Michael had warned management about a dangerous thermal control defect 11 days before the fire. Someone had deleted his warning from the official record. That was the first mystery. The second mystery was sitting in my garage. The transport driver said the Stratos had lost power twice at highway speed. Evelyn wanted a complete diagnostic inspection before a major investor event on Friday. I quoted an initial fee of $899. That price covered secure diagnostics, thermal imaging, battery isolation, and 4 hours of specialized labor. On an ordinary car, it would have been expensive. On a $5 million prototype with enough voltage to stop a human heart, it was cautious. Evelyn arrived an hour later with 4 executives, a personal assistant, and a man named Victor Hale, her chief operating officer. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my first car. Victor was tall, polished, and smiling. But his eyes examined every camera, door, and tool cabinet in the room. Evelyn glanced at my estimate. "You want $899 just to touch my engine?" she asked. Her executives laughed. One of them looked at my stained sleeves and said, "Maybe the grease is imported." Another asked if the fee included washing my hands. I had been mocked by wealthy customers before. Usually I ignored it. Skill does not become smaller because an arrogant person cannot recognize it. I calmly explained that the car had recorded an unstable temperature rise in the rear battery module. Before I could remove the protective housing, I needed written authorization. Victor stepped closer. "The car has a software issue," he said. "Clear the codes, update the system, and have it ready by noon. A software update cannot repair damaged coolant lines," I replied. His smile tightened. Evelyn waved one hand. "This is why companies replace people with computers. Machines do not turn a simple task into theater." Then she told her assistant to start the car so they could hear the fault. That was when I saw it. Through a narrow opening beneath the battery shield, a stainless steel connector reflected the overhead light. It was the wrong color. The factory used black titanium fittings in that section because stainless steel expanded differently under extreme heat. I also noticed a faint blue stain around the connector, leaking dielectric coolant. I closed my toolbox. The assistant reached for the start button. I stepped between her and the car. "If you start that engine again, someone will die," I said. and the person who arranged it is standing in this garage. No one laughed. Victor was the first to speak. That sounds like a threat. It is a warning. I pointed toward the rear module and explained what I had seen. Someone had replaced a factory connector with a cheaper fitting, then loosened it just enough to create a slow leak. When the car reached high power, the coolant pressure would rise, the connector could separate, the battery would overheat, and the passenger compartment could fill with toxic smoke before the doors unlocked. Evelyn's face lost some of its color, but only for a moment. "You saw all that without opening the housing?" she asked. "I saw enough to refuse to start it." Victor laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "Or you created a frightening story to justify your fee." He pulled out his phone and said he was calling the manufacturer. I told him to do it. Then I locked the car's keys inside my safe and switched on every security camera in the garage. That made him angry. He demanded the keys. I refused. Evelyn threatened to sue me for unlawful possession of her property. I told her the transport company could take the car as soon as a certified hazardous vehicle team arrived. Until then, no one would energize it inside my building. For several seconds, we stared at one another. Then Evelyn said something I did not expect. "Daniel Mercer," she whispered. "You are Michael Mercer's brother." Victor turned toward her too quickly. That small movement told me more than his words could have. Evelyn had recognized my name, but Victor had reacted to Michael's. I asked how they knew him. Evelyn said Michael had caused the Nevada accident. Her voice sounded rehearsed, as if she had repeated the sentence for lawyers 100 times. I took the anonymous test logs from my office and placed them on the workbench, then explained these. Victor did not look at the pages. He looked at the envelope. "Where did you get that?" he asked. Evelyn slowly turned toward him. I felt the entire situation change. Until that moment, I had believed they were united against me. Now I saw fear between them. Evelyn ordered everyone except Victor to leave. Her executives walked out without another joke. My security cameras recorded every second. When we were alone, Evelyn read Michael's logs. His notes described a defect in a thermal bypass valve. Under certain conditions, the valve reported that it was open while remaining physically closed. Heat built inside the battery until the cells entered thermal runaway. It was the same type of system installed in Evelyn's Stratos. She looked at Victor. "You told me those reports never existed." Victor remained calm. "They were fabricated after the accident." "Then how did my brother predict the failure 11 days before he died?" I asked. Victor said nothing. Evelyn finally agreed to let me inspect the car. I made her sign the authorization while the cameras recorded. Victor announced that his attorney had advised him to leave. As he passed me, he leaned close and spoke quietly. "Your brother did not know when to stop either." That was not an insult. It was a confession wearing a disguise. I waited until he drove away. Then I called Detective Lena Ortiz, an investigator I had met while trying to reopen Michael's case. I also called the hypercar manufacturer and requested an emergency technical representative. By early afternoon, Evelyn, Detective Ortiz, the factory representative, and I stood around the Stratos. We removed the battery shield under video surveillance. The evidence was worse than I expected. The incorrect connector was real, but it was only one part of the sabotage. A small wireless relay had been hidden beside the cooling controller. It could force the bypass valve closed through a remote signal. The relay carried no serial number, but its circuit board had been coated in a pale green protective resin. I had seen that resin before. Cross Dynamics used it on military electronics. The factory representative confirmed that the car had been serviced 2 days earlier at a private facility owned by Evelyn's company. According to the electronic record, Victor had personally authorized the work. Evelyn sat down hard on a metal chair. "Why would he try to kill me?" she asked. Detective Ortiz answered with another question. "What happens to Cross Dynamics if you die?" Evelyn explained that a board vote was scheduled for Friday morning. She planned to remove Victor after discovering hidden losses in one of the company's divisions. If she died before the vote, Victor would become interim CEO. A life insurance policy owned by the company would also pay $80 million. There was more. Evelyn had planned to drive the hypercar onto a stage during the investor event. More than 2,000 people would be inside the convention hall. A battery fire could have trapped hundreds of them. The sabotage was not just murder. It was a potential disaster. Detective Ortiz wanted to seize the car and arrest Victor immediately. But the relay alone did not prove who installed it. Victor could claim a technician acted without his knowledge. If police moved too soon, his lawyers might bury the case. Then Evelyn received a text message from him. It said, "I found a factory specialist who can fix everything tonight. Bring the car to the company lab. No police. We can avoid a scandal." He did not know that the police were already there. We made a plan. The factory representative removed the dangerous connector and isolated the battery. I left the hidden relay in place, but disconnected its power output. From the outside, the car looked untouched. Evelyn replied that she would bring it to the lab at 9 that night. Detective Ortiz arranged surveillance, but she warned us not to provoke Victor. We needed him to reveal knowledge that only the saboteur would possess. At 8:30, I loaded the Stratos into the transport trailer. Evelyn rode with the detective in an unmarked car. I drove the truck. Rain struck the windshield all the way into the city. The Cross Dynamics laboratory stood beside an old shipping canal, surrounded by fences and dark warehouses. Victor waited inside with 2 security guards and a technician named Noah Price. I recognized Noah immediately. He had worked the night shift at the Nevada lab when Michael died. In the official investigation, Noah claimed he had seen Michael bypass a safety alarm. His testimony had destroyed my brother's reputation. When Noah saw me, he stepped backward. "You said he wouldn't be here," he told Victor. The room went silent. Victor recovered quickly. He ordered the guards to take my phone. I told him the phone was in the truck. That was true. The recording device was inside a button on my coveralls. Evelyn played her role perfectly. She told Victor she wanted the car repaired and the entire incident forgotten. She promised not to remove him from the company if he could guarantee her safety. Victor smiled. "There was never any real danger," he said. "Mercer frightened you with a loose connector." I asked how he knew it was loose. We had never announced that detail. His eyes shifted toward Noah. Noah began breathing too fast. I walked to the car and placed my hand on the rear cover. "The relay was clever," I said. "But you made the same mistake you made in Nevada." Victor's expression changed. I continued. "You trusted the software report and ignored the physical valve. Michael found that flaw. You deleted his warning, then used Noah to blame him after the fire." Noah shouted that it had not happened that way. Victor ordered him to be quiet. But fear had already broken Noah's loyalty. He pointed at Victor and said, "You told me the lab would be empty." Evelyn looked at him. Noah covered his mouth, as if he could pull the words back. Victor moved toward him. I stepped between them. Noah began talking. 6 years earlier, Victor had ordered an unauthorized high-load battery test to impress a government buyer. Michael discovered that the bypass valve was stuck and tried to stop the test. Victor overrode him remotely. When the battery overheated, Victor disabled an external alarm to prevent the buyer from hearing it. The fire started seconds later. Michael was still inside. Noah had been paid $200,000 to give false testimony. Victor promised that no one would ever know. Then Victor did something desperate. He grabbed a control tablet from the workbench and activated the hidden relay in the Stratos. He expected the cooling system to fail. Instead, nothing happened. I had disconnected the output hours earlier. Victor pressed the command again and again. "Looking for this?" I asked, holding up the relay's power module. The side doors opened. Detective Ortiz entered with officers from the Seattle Police Department and federal investigators who had been waiting outside. Victor finally understood that he had demonstrated control of the sabotage device in front of witnesses and cameras. The confidence left his face. As the officers handcuffed him, he looked at Evelyn and said she owed everything to him. Evelyn answered, "No. I just trusted you long enough to learn what that cost." Noah was arrested too. He later accepted a plea agreement and testified about the Nevada fire, the destroyed logs, and the money Victor had paid him. The investigation uncovered far more than one death and one sabotage car. Victor had hidden defective battery systems in government contracts. He had moved company money through shell businesses. He had also arranged the hypercar failure to remove Evelyn before she could expose his financial crimes. The $899 inspection had uncovered a conspiracy worth hundreds of millions. But justice was not simple. Evelyn had not ordered Michael's death, yet she had helped create the culture that allowed Victor to hide it. She had accepted the report because it protected her company. She had never met my mother. She had never looked my brother's name up after signing the settlement. 2 days after Victor's arrest, she came back to my garage alone. She wore jeans and a dark coat. Without the executives and cameras, she looked tired rather than powerful. She placed a check on my workbench. It was for $5 million. I pushed it back. My brother's life is not an invoice, I said. She told me it was not payment. It was the beginning of a safety foundation in Michael's name. The foundation would protect engineers who reported dangerous defects. It would pay their legal costs and support families harmed by corporate cover-ups. I told her a foundation meant nothing unless she told the truth publicly, so she did. At the investor event, Evelyn did not drive the Stratos onto the stage. She walked out alone. In front of employees, reporters, and shareholders, she admitted that Cross Dynamics had falsely blamed Michael. She announced the evidence against Victor, released the hidden safety reports, and resigned as CEO. The company's stock fell. The board panicked. Several executives lost their positions. People online called her confession brave. I did not. Bravery would have been asking hard questions 6 years earlier, when the truth was expensive and my brother was no longer alive to defend himself. Her confession was necessary, but necessity is not heroism. Still, it gave my family something we had been denied. Michael's name was cleared. Victor was eventually convicted of manslaughter, attempted murder, fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to decades in federal prison. Noah received a shorter sentence for cooperating. Cross Dynamics paid a large settlement to my mother and to the families of other employees harmed by concealed defects. Most of that money went into the safety foundation. I agreed to serve on its board, but only if working engineers, not public relations executives, held the majority of seats. As for the Stratos, Evelyn sold it. The new owner brought it to my garage 6 months later and asked what I charged for an inspection. $899, I said. He nodded and signed the form without laughing. Before he left, he asked why I had not taken Evelyn's $5 million check for myself. I looked at the framed photograph of Michael hanging above my workbench. Because revenge is not becoming the person who hurt you, I told him. It is making sure they can never hurt anyone that way again. I still work in the same small garage. My coveralls are still stained. Grace still collects beneath my fingernails. Wealthy people sometimes walk through my door and assume that the price of my clothes measures the value of my mind. I let them believe it for a moment. Then I open the hood. Machines always tell the truth eventually. A scar on a bolt, a stain beneath a valve, a temperature reading that rises half a degree too quickly. Every secret leaves a mark. People leave marks too. Victor believed money could erase his. Evelyn believed power could protect her from seeing them. Both were wrong. My brother once told me that a warning is a gift, even when it is delivered by someone no one respects. Ignore it, and the truth will return as a consequence. That is what happened in my garage. They laughed at the grease-stained mechanic, who asked for $899. By the end, the fee was the cheapest warning they had ever received, and ignoring Michael's warning had cost them everything.